Hello, legends. I'm delighted to talk to Ted Shirley, whose upcoming book details all I think we're going to need to know about being a sniper in Afghanistan. There you are. Look, there as it is, ready for pre-order on Amazon. And as you know, I like to get a bit more deeper than all the military stuff. So I think we're going to be talking about trauma. So let's get into it.
Yes.
How are you doing, mate?
Absolutely fantastic, Chris. Yeah, thank you very much for having me on today.
Not a problem. I saw you was on James's podcast the other day.
Yes, we had a right good chat.
Yes, he's a very nice guy, James.
He certainly is. Yeah, I can imagine us being friends now.
Yeah. He's certainly helped me out back in the day. I think the James English podcast, Anything Goes, was the second podcast I was ever on, next to Sean Atwood's, I think.
Was it really?
Yeah, it was
Wow.
right back in the days where we were all starting our YouTube careers.
Yeah,
We're kind of like the old school. But,
certainly are the OGs.
yeah, those guys have really flown with it. So, congrats on your book, mate. When does it come out?
Yeah, thank you. It comes out November 30th this year, which is rapidly approaching. There's sort of been this like big 3 or 4 month build up to it coming out, but we're in the home stretch now.
Yes, has everyone been wishing you well with it?
Yeah, do you know what? The support I've had has been absolutely incredible. It's blown me away. It's been really humbling, to be honest, and sort of quite heartwarming. I've been having all sorts of messages of, people who've sort of got a bit of hope out of what I'm having to say and things like that, which is really nice. It's what it's all about, to be honest. It's the whole reason of the book.
Yes, good. Well, I'm looking forward to diving into that. Did you get people say to you kind of, what you wasting your time writing a book for, or they'll never publish you and all that kind of stuff?
I did. Yeah, I did. I'm quite happy, to be honest. It's worked out the way it is. It's looking like it's going to be a bit of a success. So I'm glad I stuck with it, because it was definitely something that, I had to take a bit of a step back from working and sort of traditional way of earning money and stuff, and kind of hold my breath a little bit. It took me like about just over a year to write. So yeah, it's definitely had an impact on my life, but worth it.
Yeah, it's definitely a commit. Did you? I bet you learnt a lot in the writing process.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is an embarrassing thing, but I'd never actually read a full book before writing my own one. And it spurred this thing now where I can't put books down. It's made me a reader. And the feelings and emotions that it brought out as well were just incredibly positive, in a way of, finally realizing that my problems were gone and I could actually go as deep as possible into these things, and it still not affect me.
Good. So I'm climbing Everest in April.
Yes.
Just going to show friends. There you are, friends. There's my GoFundMe page. If you can chip in a fiver and help me shine a light for struggling veterans like I used to be when I was homeless and addicted on the streets of Hong Kong, I will love you forever. There's a link below. One of the things, though, Ted, I want to do, and I think this is really missing in the whole military stroke veterans community, is I want to make the link between adverse childhood experiences,
Yeah.
childhood trauma, abuse, physical, mental, sexual, neglect, divorce, separation, all of this stuff that I know loads of us that joined the Marines, we went through, maybe not all of it, but certainly aspects of it, right?
Yeah.
And we've got this situation where we've got this significantly high suicide rate in
Yes.
both the military and the veterans community. And I'm trying to help people to start highlighting that I think research has shown there's a link between the two, but no one's talking about it.
Yeah, it's very true. Yeah, I don't have, for me personally, I didn't have any of that sort of stuff, which is probably something that, could tie into this topic. But there's so many lads that I know that came from, broken homes, or they'd had trauma in their childhood, or, be that through fostering, or any of those sort of things. So yeah, I definitely think so. I think there's an element to that as well that makes a bloody good soldier.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and also it's a good recruiting material. It's a good recruiting
Yeah.
pool, I suppose you could say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm right in thinking, Ted, you did you struggle with PTSD after you left?
So the onset was actually when I was still in Afghanistan, which is what sort of made my case a little bit, well, complex, to be honest. I didn't realize what it was, and it was never called PTSD until probably a year or so after leaving theatre. But yeah, it came on in a very, I suppose, unorthodox way, where it was just a rapid onset of these thoughts and nightmares and things from sort of halfway, three quarters of the way through my last tour.
And how did it onset? What did you experience?
So it started with this sort of this rumination of constantly going over events that had happened while there. So for me, that was pulling the trigger as a sniper. The more I did it, the more frequent these thoughts were running around in my mind, to the point where it sort of, the noise in my head became really, really loud and then distracting. So it was sort of, I was taken away from my reality, to be honest. And then, in order to combat that in a way, it led to me making sort of dangerous decisions and being extremely aggressive and angry, which was very sort of out of character for me. And then, while still on tour, I'd be sort of told by the lads that I'd woke up in the middle of the night screaming, things like this. And the people round me are the ones who actually noticed that something was wrong. I'd sort of gone into my shell a little bit of just quiet anger, where it was only the moments of being in a contact where I really came to life. And it was, like I said, the other people around me that spotted something was wrong, thankfully, and did something about it.
And what was it about? And I'm just going to put these questions you, Ted, so
Yeah.
without trying to get too complicated it. So what was it about pulling the trigger that was coming back to haunt you, so to speak?
So it was before deploying on my last tour during our sniper course. One of the lads from the other battalion had deployed before us. He'd been then killed. So this was something that, when I was home, I saw his face on the news all the time and all this sort of stuff, and it had built this almost like a narrative inside my head where I wanted to almost get revenge and avenge his death. And when it actually came down to one day in particular, um, taking sort of multiple targets out in one day, this anger and revenge almost took over. It was like something had awoken in me that didn't plan on going anywhere for a long time. It took me a very long time to actually figure out what it was. And about probably 10 years after the fact, I learned about a thing called a moral injury. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of that, or the audience have ever heard of that. It's something where, as a child, your core values are created. What's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong, these sort of things. And it turned out that taking lives was very, very against my core values and beliefs. And that was another aspect to the PTSD symptoms that I was getting, was this absolute guilt and shame for what I'd done.
Yes. I was reading about that the other day, funnily enough. Also, incidentally, research has shown that those people with adverse childhood experiences experience the moral, what do we call it, moral injury?
The moral injury,
yeah. They experience it significantly more.
Really?
Yeah. And
that is interesting.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing, Ted, childhood trauma, because if you ask 100 people, 99 out of the 100 will say, no, my childhood was perfect. But when you start digging below the surface, it's like, what is their definition of a perfect childhood compared to what is the textbook childhood? And like people, just putting this out there, but I get a lot of people from military families. They think they're the perfect childhood because their dad was like the sergeant major. And then when it comes down to it, like, well, how much time did he spend with you as a kid? Well, none. He was a sergeant major. All right.
How strict was that household?
Yeah, and was he good around that? Well, no, he used to like drink way too much. And, you know, did he look after you and your sister? Well, no, you know, he used to beat us, but we deserved it. I'm like,
okay.
Kind of flags up a different thing. This is why I'm sort of keen to, you know, let people sort of know out there it's okay to not it's okay to talk about your childhood, you know.
Absolutely, and something that may not seem relevant to that person could actually be, you know, something. There was certainly points throughout various parts of my therapy where have you heard of EMDR therapy?
Yes.
So during that, all kinds of things would pop up, like memories of me being a little toddler and things that I couldn't even remember, you know, if I tried to. But it was all how they sort of correlated in certain sort of almost like the neural pathways were filled with various similar feelings or emotions to what I'd felt pulling that trigger. It was a very interesting journey.
Could you just briefly, for our audience, explain EMDR?
Yeah, so eye movement desensitization and reprogramming is a type of talking therapy that you could, I suppose, relate to hypnotism in a way. So there's various ways to do it, but for me, I'd have a light bar in front of me, and then the light would go from right to left, left to right. And the idea is that you follow this light, or it might be someone tapping left knee, right knee, things that go left to right. So what this does is it emulates when you're in REM sleep. So when you're in this rapid eye movement sleep, your brain is processing. So be that thoughts and things throughout that day, memories or emotions from past traumas or what have you, which I can explain a little bit more into briefly. And what happens is these memories and thoughts are passed from left to right until they reach the back of the brain, and they're then stored away in your long-term memory where they belong, where they can't do any harm, and it's all good. So the idea is that with traumatic memories or experiences, an easy way to explain it would be that you've got an office clerk that lives in your brain and takes your files from the day, puts them in the relevant filing cabinets, and they're locked away. So when you've got these traumatic memories, so for me, for instance, memories of pulling the trigger and the images and things that I'd see in Afghanistan, that's too traumatic for this clerk in your brain to handle. And so these pieces of paper and documents are left to run wild in your brain because nobody can deal with them. So the EMDR therapy is designed then to mimic that REM sleep process. And you talk about these things so that at the forefront of your brain, and then the left to right movement moves them to the back. It's a pretty incredible process to go through, and you know, one that was the very end of my therapy. To be honest, it finished it all off. The idea is that you you detach the emotions from the memories, which is how I was able to write the book and talk in such depth about these kind of things that would have left me shaking in my boots a few years ago.
Good. Is there anything you don't or can't talk about, Ted, that is going to re-traumatize you?
No, there isn't. I've probably, over the past few weeks of doing so many podcasts and interviews and things now, I've talked about these stories hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. It's desensitized to it, which is how things should be over memories. These traumatic memories can be attached from their emotions. So as much as I can think about, life-ending shots that I've made, I can have compassion and empathy for what I did, and I can feel the human emotions to it, but they're never overbearing, and they never take me over anymore, which used to happen within milliseconds.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I've got a mate, he suffered terribly after Afghanistan. And I asked him one day, you see, I come at it from a sort of different perspective because I studied all the implications of why did we go into Afghanistan? What was all that about?
Right.
What happened on 9/11? Who had the ability to put together an operation like that, etc., etc.
Wow.
And so when my mate was coming out of his PTSD, I wrongly assumed that he had this guilt that he'd been in there and, let's just say, been used by the system,
Yeah.
the military industrial complex, right?
Yeah.
And that he'd regretted the people that he'd hurt.
Right.
And to be honest, I was giving him too much credit. He just turned around and went, he didn't really know what I was talking about. And he was like, no, he said, it was our lads getting hurt that had upset him, and one of them was his cousin. So like I totally get that, but he just seemed to like not have any idea of any of this other stuff, and I just wondered if we could explore that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really sort of common thing that as like, and a lot of people don't have the opportunity, I suppose, to dive as deeply as you have into it. It's always something that comes up. I personally don't really know why we were there. I know what I was doing there once I was there. I know my reasons for signing on the dotted line and going. I know what they were, and they all fit into my core belief sort of system. I was there to help. And I think that's why it sort of took over me a little bit. I felt into the pain of the targets that I neutralized. I started to imagine how scary it must have been for them, how they must be missed, what the effects were on their families. It led me to become less of that callous mindset that I'd become being a sniper. It sort of humanized me to the point where I understood that the person I was looking at through my scope had a narrative given to them throughout their lives, just as I did. Like you just mentioned 9/11 there. For me personally, that was a very big factor of me joining the military. And the sort of, terrorism was very much the word of the day on the telly. And for a young teenage fit and healthy lad who wanted to help, it's easy to get into those shoes and not really know the actual reasons behind it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, how can you say? It's an interesting one. I remember when I served in conflict, I really saw that if I could have taken out the quote unquote enemy,
Yeah.
then I would really have been doing my job. I would have been ultra professional, and I would have got the kudos of all the lads. And
Yeah.
but there was always like a little part of my mind, Ted, that was, I didn't want to kind of think of the consequences. I just assumed everything would be gravy. I'd be the big hero. And that was kind of probably about as far as my thinking got.
Yeah.
Now that I'm old and grey, I'll be completely honest. I don't mean to be offensive, but I'm really glad I'm really glad I never had to take anyone, we never had the opportunity to take anyone out.
Yeah, it's a heavy burden to bear, especially one when you don't know if you've done the actual right thing or not. Very difficult. But I understand what your mindset there of it was the same for me. It became, I wanted to be good at my job. I'd worked so hard to become a sniper that, it was one of those things where I put pressure on myself to be good. I wanted to give people a reason to be proud of me. But I also wanted to be good in my job in the essence that I could keep the lads around me safe. If I was on that roof, I put this immense pressure that each of those people's lives was in my hands. Although it wasn't, they were all trained infantry soldiers and very good at their jobs. But I put myself in this role. It was partly down to, we'd get into a contact and my name would get shouted to get on the roof and deal with it. And, obviously that's going to happen with a weapon system that can reach those kind of ranges and, optics that can spot things from that far away. But it gradually became this thing that I took on my own shoulders, and that weight really did weigh on me, to the point where it was almost like every time we got into a contact, like a stopwatch had started, and I had to deal with that as fast as possible. Otherwise, I was convinced one of my mates were going to die. Didn't care so much if I did, which was another state of mind that it's quite weird to sort of come out of, where I've mentioned it a few times. I'd be almost submissive and willing to die by going into direct fire on a roof and laying down calm as a sleeping baby to make these shots. But I'd be absolutely positive that I wasn't going to, So I think, I think there's so many layers to why I began to feel the way I did. Things like a moral value. So, like you just mentioned there, quote unquote, a target, calling people targets, things like bayonet training, these sorts of things, they lower your moral value of a life. That person does become a target. And it's not, some people can go for an entire career and keep that target mentality. For me, I couldn't. I don't know whether it's because I could see the faces of the people that I was taking out. A lot of British troops they didn't see the Taliban. They're normally here, a crack in the distance and have some incoming stuff, but it would be very rare that someone would actually get their eyes on the fighters. And I think that sort of personalized it a little bit for me, where I was no longer to just be in that target mindset. It was, these were people. And then I just started to give myself so much grief, thinking, what would I do if our country was filled with foreign fighters who were here to do the right thing? How would I be acting? Would I sign up? As soon as you flip the coin and change the perspective a little bit, it kind of it awoke all these emotions and extremely strong ones of guilt and a shame, really.
Yes, it's like you broke through the programming, isn't it?
Yeah, it was very much that. Yeah, having that mindset of a soldier, and you can, I'm sure that most veterans can cast their mind back to that mental state where you're almost able to cut off emotions. And when you're leaving on tour, I know for me, I was very much able to cut off missing family, friends back home, that kind of thing, where you become callous. It's the switch is on. I flicked that switch off when I was there in combat, and it was a rude awakening and a very quick one.
Yes. The reason, incidentally, that I said looking back, I'm so glad I never killed anyone, is simply, Ted, because I ended up so chronically mentally unwell, as I said earlier, on the streets of Hong Kong, miles away from home.
Yeah.
Ended up, working for a triad fraternity as one of their nightclub doormans, and really things couldn't have got darker or more serious. And I
Yeah.
think if I had the additional burden that you've had to work through, that might have been the thing that pushed me over the edge, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was for me. It was the thing that wouldn't go away. It, this one guy in particular whose life I took, he would haunt me every single night. He would, every night I'd have these nightmares where his mouth was stitched closed and his eyes were stitched closed. I don't know what the relevance of this is. I've been asking everyone I meet, but yeah, and he would sort of be ripping me from my bed, and I'd wake up in this like the worst panic you could ever imagine. Thinking that somebody was about to kill me in my bedroom. And this would happen nightly to the point where the exhaustion of that and not being able to sleep, coupled with this thing that is not going away, this guilt isn't going anywhere. If I don't speak to anyone, it's absolutely not going to go anywhere. Talking to people allows us to gain perspective. And it was through perspective and context that I was able to sort of be at peace with the things that I'd done in the end. It took me a very long time to get round to that process. But yeah, it was absolutely the one thing. I don't know. I never really thought about it as I was training to become a sniper or even beforehand. It was never something that played on my mind. Oh, is that going to bother me? No. And in all honesty, I think the mentality of that, almost like that pack mentality of soldiers, was we wanted to do that. We wanted to be in contact. If there'd be days, I remember days where we'd just be bored and we'd wish we were getting shot at, and putting together all these many, many complex levels and sort of external and internal influences that I was having on myself and people were having on me. It was like the perfect storm, to be honest, and one that at my core I wasn't prepared for.
Absolutely. It, it How is it then? I mean, I'm sorry if I'm asking a trite question that everyone else has asked you before, but that the first time then that you shot someone,
Yeah.
can you talk us through it?
Yeah. The feelings
I
and
mean, the scenario. Where were you on the ground? How did it come about?
okay, yeah. So the first time I ever really saw someone, the first time it happened was through a wall, um, which didn't really affect me, to be honest. It was, yeah, it wasn't really relevant. I think because it wasn't as personal as the next one to come. So it was the second time, where we deployed into an area where the American Special Forces had been, and they'd got into quite a bit of trouble. So it turned out there was more Taliban there than expected, and so 4 o'clock in the morning, us Welsh madmen, we jumped on the choppers and off we went. So yeah, we were sort of greeted by Dushka anti-aircraft guns going off at the Chinooks in the air and RPGs. So it was a very, it was a hot landing first thing in the morning, still in the dark. So our job was to basically go and kick the hornet's nest, find out how many Taliban were in the area, and just gauge really what can be sort of done in the area. So we quickly dealt with the early morning contact and moved off to pre-designated compounds that were in a sort of triangular formation. As we've approached our designated compound, I've jumped up onto the roof and started to scan the area, make a little note of, distances. That blue door over there is 850 meters, the sort of things that I'd do as a sniper to sort of quickly be able to make adjustments to the scope. And as I'm doing this, I noticed a motorbike going from right to left, left to right. And each time it goes past, there's one person on it, and then there's two, and then there's one, and then there's two. So what I realised was someone is getting dropped off here. Something's going on. So as I've just sort of sussed this, I could see a minibus in the distance with just a driver, and it goes past and comes back, and then it's full of fighting age males, and it goes off into the distance and comes back again with just the driver. So fighters were getting dropped off into positions, and it turned out that this was happening all around us. Later, we found out there was hundreds of Taliban in the area. So as I'm watching this guy on the motorbike, I've decided that I don't want him to think he's getting away with what he's doing. I want him to know that I've got eyes on him. And if I decide to fire my weapon, it's over. I didn't want them to get the confidence that they'd got into position secretly without us knowing. So I called down to the boss on the ground who's just underneath me, and he was like, yeah, give him a warning shot. So as I've let loose this round that's landed a couple of meters in front of his motorbike front tire, this crescendo of noise from all around us just erupted of machine gun fire and AK-47s and RPGs, and it had begun. This day went for like 13 hours, this contact in the end. So I'm sort of lay on this roof. We've not had any time to really build up any sort of defensive positions or anything. I think I had like one or two sandbags in front of me just to sort of, get something behind. And I've noticed these incoming rounds that are getting very, very close, that whiz that's going inches past your head. And as I've done this, I've sort of looked to the general direction of where I thought it was coming from. And I saw a fighting age male, same age as me, maybe a couple of years younger, maybe at this point, I'm 21 years old. So I've looked, and it looks like he's directly aiming at my head, and he's trying to take my head off as best as he can. So I've done the appropriate clicks and stuff. And it was at this point then where the thoughts and feelings of revenge and thoughts of my mate that had been killed before we'd got there and stuff, it was like a floodgate opened. It never happened to me before, and this anger took over. And it was the first time I pulled the trigger with actual anger in me. It didn't feel like a job. It felt personal, almost like a vendetta. So I've pulled the trigger, and the round's hit him in the throat. He's gone down, and that is the guy who haunted my dreams. He's the one who had the eyes stitched and the mouth stitched shut and this gaping hole. And it felt, there were so many emotions. There was success. I'd made a shot from it, I think it was like 750 meters away or something like that, which is, it's not too much of a difficult shot, but it instigated a whole load of stuff that ended up with me then taking out 5 Taliban there in the same area as they kept coming to the same fire position. And so it was this day and that one guy in particular that upset me, I suppose, is the way to go it. I just couldn't get it out of my head. From that day on, it was there daily. The look in his face, the fear, the terror that I could see. So this guy was sort of holding his neck and reaching out another hand to call to someone from behind another building, and that look that was really hard to shake. The guilt and the shame. I'm just feeling so sad that I don't know, that it ended that way, even though it was my job. There's just 1,000 different angles that I came at it from. But then with that came the sort of bravado of the lads around me and other people hearing about what had happened. And the other snipers in our unit had done the same sort of things. We'd had a very successful day as a small sniper platoon that day. And pretty soon word around Camp Bastion kind of got around a little bit. And so that fed into this pride, ego almost thing, that just made us all want to do it more. And it was almost like a train that just wasn't going to stop until I was willing to go to breaking point, and that's what happened. I gave everything that I had until I had no more mind.
It's interesting though, because whatever anyone's thoughts, mine, yours, anyone else's are on this, the rights or wrongs, the egalities of war, etc. At the end of the day, you are in a situation where you're getting surrounded, and you
Yeah.
ain't you. There's going to be no quarter whatsoever if you get overrun.
No, it was very close. The lads around me were fighting, and I mean, fighting like lions to keep these. So there was loads of rat runs and alleyways behind me, and obviously I couldn't be turning around and stuff. I had to have complete trust in them. And there's footage of these firefights going on that you can just hear it. You can hear the absolute fighting for our lives. Basically, it was that strong. The threat of grenades coming over the walls and stuff as the Taliban were getting closer was very, very concerning. So yeah, it was a sort of life or death situation, which yeah, that did help me. It gave another perspective, I suppose. I felt invincible at the time. I felt, as if nothing could ever happen to me. But I was wrong.
Did you cross the line? The moral. I mean, obviously, there's the question of morality runs through this whole thing. What I mean is, in your keenness to get
Yeah.
what they call in the military kills,
Yes.
were you kind of pushing the boundaries a bit?
No, I was always on the right side of it. It was just if we were in a contact, I wanted to deal with it. It was almost like, just give me a minute, lads, and I'll have a crack, and then if I don't, we can all get involved. That's kind of how it felt, and once I'd started to take that weight on my shoulders and these emotions, it was almost another thing of I don't want these other lads to feel the way that I'm feeling. Almost like I'm already damaged goods. I'll take it on the chin, and it was yeah. It was tricky. I think because it was such a busy tour for us, there was no worries about are we doing the right thing or not. We were in some real good fighting stuff. We were in the thick of it, and most of the time on the edge of a stronghold. So it was yeah, it was a very testing time, but one that yeah, like I said, I wanted to take on my shoulders.
Friends at home, we're purposely not mentioning Ted's regiment because he didn't in the book. So it just seems that you can probably gather he's from an esteemed Welsh one.
Yes, with 300 years of history.
There we go. Yes, it reminds me of that scene in Zulu where they all start singing what's
Yeah.
that famous song called?
Men of Harlech.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I did a bit of internet searching on that, and they said that actually the Welsh contingent in that regiment was very small.
Yeah.
It wasn't what they made out to be in the film.
No, it was not. No, but you can always trust the Welshman to sing.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I was in Cardiff the other day actually.
Oh yeah,
Yes, my
nice.
buddy Matthew Pritchard, formerly of Dirty Sanchez fame,
Yes.
was having his doco film was premiered.
Oh wow.
So I went up.
Oh, no, I've just seen today was it or last couple of days? 3 years sober for him.
Yes, 3 years off the source.
Yeah.
It's coming to us all, mate. You know.
Yeah, this is it. Yeah, I can certainly feel it winding down now. It's absolutely not a priority of mine anymore.
No, things. It starts to cost you more and more as you get. It starts to cost some of us more and more as we get older. Obviously, can't speak for
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
so, what about the IED situation? Were you in fear for your life every time going out, or was it just look, we've got to go out there, put it out your mind?
Yeah, that was it, to be honest. It was the first week or two was a little bit getting the Valens out, the mine detectors and stuff, and it was something that in the end lads were, oh, does that look like an ID? And stepping on it just to see if it was. That's it. It kind of grew to that point where, yeah, it just became a kind of a hindrance, I suppose. Yeah, occupational hazard.
Ted, how many tours did you do?
Two I did, yeah. 2008 and then a 2009-10 one.
And did you lose any blokes?
We did, yeah. We lost one from our battalion, unfortunately. We had multiple casualties and quite a few sort of catastrophic ones at that. Which added it fuel to the fire for me, to be honest. Because at this point, once we'd taken casualties, I'd been removed from the front line. I'd been medically evacuated once, as I mentioned earlier, the people around me had sort of noticed the change in me. I got brought back to Camp Bastion and sat in front of a psychiatric nurse. I was told that I have a bit of an addiction to pulling that trigger and I'm tired. So go and get some rest, go and work in the stores for a couple of weeks. So that's what I did. And then as I was working in these stores, bloody good mate of mine got hit with catastrophic injuries. Luckily, he's still here with us today. But one of the other lads was unfortunately killed on the ground. So that added to this guilt and shame, even though there's nothing I could have done. It felt I had that internal monologue of if I was there, I could have maybe done something, which is something that is so common. Not that sort of survivor's guilt, I suppose you could say it was to a degree.
Did you enjoy the whole process of becoming a sniper and getting hands on with the weaponry?
Yeah, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It made me feel elevated. I didn't sort of feel like just a sort of a rifleman anymore, which is what I wanted. It was the lessons and the learning curve was so sort of intense that every single day we were learning something, and it was great. And once we'd sort of moved to like sort of phase two of the sniper card there in Brecon, that's when it was really good. It's what I signed up for. I wanted to be in the mud and living in the trees, and it was fantastic. It really was. I was living the dream, the actual dream that I'd had since being a kid. I was living it. And I was to a point out in Afghanistan on that second tour. I wasn't a sniper on my first tour, and yeah, it was. I don't know. It was a bit gutting to live my dream and actually go, wow, this is fucking me up.
Yes. The reason I asked, Ted, is obviously when I served, we were the first lot to go through the SA-80.
Right.
Back when it was a bit questionable, you could say. And because I was fortunate to serve on board ship, I got issued a Browning 9mm and an SLR. So
Right.
unlike a lot of people who served at my time, I got to experience the old weapon, what all the old sweats were talking about, and still do to this day, let's be honest.
Yes.
And also pistol, SMG.
Yeah.
We even fired a self-loading or a pump-action shotgun at one point on the range. But that's when I started to appreciate the difference in ballistics. The SLR down the range was absolutely just a different weapon to the SA-80.
Really?
The accuracy with just an iron sight, and the SA-80 obviously has got the optic sight.
Yeah.
You'd think you'd be miles off, and it was the complete opposite. You could literally lay that slug down, and it would
Really?
bang on target. And
It's a good feeling, that, isn't it?
yeah, well, the SA-80, I mean, it was a bit of a joke. At 300 meters with a wind, you're aiming off anything up to 15 feet.
Yeah.
What's that? 5 meters. You're aiming 5 meters off the target to
Yeah.
get.
That's insane. But one thing I noticed that sort of using the SA-80, you'd never learn about like the rifling and how the rifling affects around, sending it to the right and these sort of things. So it was learning that, how all the elements affect temperature or altitude and thing affect around. That was really good. And like you're saying there, SLR to SA-80, we started on the L96 sniper rifles and then moved on to the 338, the L155A3, I think it is. Off the top of my head, I've not said that combination of letters and numbers in a long time. But yeah, the difference was, wow, this is a weapon system. Obviously, the 338 was designed for shooting engine blocks. That's what it was originally for. So it had a lot more weight to it, but the accuracy and the distance was good. Especially that we had a Schmidt and Bender scope on the top of it, and so that was an incredible piece of kit by itself. Let alone the sticks, which would be the thermal imaging sights that we'd have attached to them. So yeah, it was a whole world of new shiny gadgets that we'd never really seen or heard of before that we were now getting to play with.
Remind me the name of the former weapon. The L1, was it? The
L96 was that was the first one. Yeah, that was a 7.62 sniper round. That one.
Yeah, we got to fire. I think it was either that one or its predecessor in training.
Oh.
And we were just firing off a cliff down at the range into the sea. And one lad stepped up to take his shot. And I just saw the training team, the two corporals, just looked at each other and sort of discreetly smiled. And they'd realised that he had the scope right up against his...
Oh, no.
And, of course, as soon as he took that shot, it kicked back and the edge of the metal scope was like a cutting ring, like what you cut, pastries out of. And it just put this big ding. He was called Murray, that chap was. I don't
still
think
got the ring round his eye.
Yeah, I don't think Murray made it through. I think he was one of the fall by the wayside type, guys.
Oh, no.
But so that was 7.62. How much bigger in layman's terms is the slug of the other rifle?
I'm not sure if you can see that, but you're talking sort of that much difference,
Wow.
So, yeah, it's a hell of a difference, and the weight of the round and stuff. It's a force to be reckoned with for sure.
Not as big as 50 cal, but
not as big as no. So in sort of 7.62, 50 cal. This is bang in between.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Friends at home, I'm asking. I just love all the technical stuff about. I like the fact that in America, you can actually own a weapon and go and shoot on the range or whatever it is. It's all the combat sides. that was my younger days, you could say.
Yeah, there's something calming about shooting on a range. I think it's doing it for 3 months every day on a sniper cadre. You learn to sort of get into this, what I call in my book, like the bubble, which is almost like a meditative state, and it's calming. It's like fishing. similar mindset, I suppose. Obviously, depending what's down the other end.
I've had Robin Horsfall on the podcast a couple of times of the SAS Who Dares Wins Iranian embassy siege.
Okay, yeah.
Fame or notoriety, but bit of both.
Yeah.
And he was saying when he served, the SAS would be trained by the Marines snipers. Is that still a thing?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, so for the course that I took, especially that was a Royal Marine sniper course. So yeah, there was definitely Royal Marine input and Royal Marine instructors there. And there was a mixture, to be honest. We had veterans of the Falklands who were there as well, and we sort of had ballistics experts and things like that. They were a sort of a civilian attachment to the course. It was really it went in depth, as well as one of the guys from our unit ourselves, who was our sniper commander. He'd sort of left the military and gone off on a world of training special forces around the world, and then came back to join our regiment. So we had this just whole world of information at our fingertips, really, just getting ploughed into us, which was great because it definitely came in handy having sort of listened to the experiences of other snipers who've been there and done it and got the t-shirt and learning little tips. For instance, like one of the tips would be as we're grabbing the weapon, we'd squeeze it really tightly and then do the sort of piano playing motion. And that meant that every time we grabbed the weapon and we were about to take a shot, we'd have the same pressure. It was like muscle memory. So we'd hold the weapon exactly the same each and every time. So it's little things like that, those sort of little tidbits that made us, well, good, to be honest. We were a whopping 10 pence pieces at 1,000 meters.
Wow, a kilometre.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
It was pretty standard for us, that, to be fair.
What was it? I know this is one of those cliche questions, but what was your longest shot in Afghanistan?
Just under a mile, so 1,560 something meters. So at that point, I wasn't even aiming at the target; I was aiming off at the target, which was that was an interesting day. That was just a few days before actually getting pulled off the ground. That one, yeah, but which I'm sort of glad about because obviously, what sniper wouldn't want to make a shot from that sort of distance? Well, it was 3 shots. So yeah, it was a feeling of accomplishment. And what was pretty cool at the end of once I'd sort of taken out these 3 targets from that kind of distance, an American Apache, sort of came into the area and popped up on the radio and sort of commended me on the shooting, which was I don't know, yeah, it was just a little positive to the day.
I'm trying to think. Who is the chap? Craig, isn't it? Craig Harrison.
Yeah, he got the world record for a while there, didn't he?
Yeah, he's been on the podcast. He went through the mill.
Yes, he did. I'm going to be sitting down with Craig soon. Actually, he started his own podcast.
Yeah,
I'm really looking forward to that one as well. Yeah, sort of having a sniper chat.
yeah. I hope he's doing all right. He's very, very honest. Up front about
Yeah,
all his
it's
experiences.
yeah, he has been. It was something when I was struggling that he was the sort of closest thing that I could sort of relate to, I suppose, in the public eye, and sort of being able to see him break down on camera and things like that. It was very powerful. Obviously, I've not had the chance to sit down and talk with him about it, but yeah, but I think that him knowing that has helped people is something along the lines of what I'm doing with this book. I kind of want to be able to help people without directly helping people. Do you know what I mean? I need to sort of protect my own mental health and my own energy now that I've worked so hard to get it to the place where it is, where I'm happy as soon as I wake up in the morning again. And these sort of things. It can take its toll helping others.
Yeah, I've no doubt you'll develop strategies over the coming months because putting yourself in the public eye comes, it's not without. You're gonna have
Yeah,
detractors, unfortunately.
absolutely. Yeah, I've learned that the internet's got a bit of a sharp tongue every now and then on it.
Yeah, yeah. It's
So yeah.
I I think you got to kind of imagine that there's if you imagine like a whirlwind vortex that's just going on over there.
Yeah.
When someone starts kicking off, just picture them in that, and that's just their own shit that
Yeah.
they're going around in, and
This is it. Yeah, the sort of stance I've taken is, if it's negative, I'm not getting involved in it. And if it is negative for whatever reason, or people have got a negative opinion on these things that I'm talking about, I would suggest that they go and get the context first and realize that, I'm not some person that's going around and promoting warfare or saying that this is a good thing. It's right. It's quite the opposite, and I'm just in a pretty unique position, I think, to one, be able to talk about what it's like at the extreme end of a conflict, taking lives, and then be on the extreme end of mental health issues, which, ended with me trying to take my own life multiple times, to then being able to recover completely. So I think context and perspective is good for everybody.
yeah, we'll come on and talk about your battle, your subsequent battle. I had a chap on the podcast very recently Barry Nisbet, who was a Canadian, or he's actually born in Britain, or born in Scotland, I think, but lived most of his life in Canada. And he signed up as a sniper, or he signed up and became a sniper. And his story that he told me is very different from yours. He was just kind of I kind of got. I had spoke to him in email beforehand, because here's the thing, Ted. Right, I used to do a lot of military podcasts, being ex-military, and then when all that medical, I call it the medical nonsense, came along, and I thought that the military let himself down in spectacular style and on all that front, treating their troops like guinea pigs and not coming to the defense of the people that they swore to, or I know you don't swear to protect the people, but what I meant is I think there's much bigger heroes that we should be celebrating in life than, and the military come very low on the scale.
Yeah.
And I had this chat with Barry beforehand, and I could see, I don't think he was aware. I think terms like the military industrial complex might have, were
okay.
He just kind of didn't, he sort of like couldn't go there because he just didn't really know anything. Well, it's fine, but I'm obviously not here to make people feel uncomfortable. At the same time, I always want to do podcasts, Ted, that on subjects that I have an interest in, and I have an interest in the human experience, that with everything that we've talked about today. Firing weapons is, I was very fortunate to be on the range fairly recently. When we went to Gran Canaria in December to start rowing across the Atlantic.
That's incredible, by the way.
Thank you. Yes, big up to
superhuman.
Big up to my rowing buddy Louis. But we got taken, Dave, I believe, if I remember rightly. Hello, Dave. Dave took us on the range over there, is what I'm trying to say. We went to this very antiquated range on Gran Canaria. It looked like a throwback to the sort of, I don't know, the when they used to wear red tunics and all that.
Oh, wow, yeah.
But sorry, I'm waffling, folks at home. I'm just trying to get my train of thought. But yeah, we went down on the range. He had a kind of, it looked like a M16 Armalite or whatever, but I think it was converted to 2.2.
Right.
And we popped off a few rounds, and it's just another thing to learn in life, isn't it? And to
it is. Yeah, it's it can be a great hobby. It's something that I think can teach more than just shooting. I think the ability to control your breath, control your mind, control your body to a point where, which are all aspects that you need to make shots at decent distances at least. I think there's a lot of lessons that can be learned from it. I was last year sort of doing some little bits and bobs with the scouts, with the Cub Scouts, taking them to shooting ranges and giving them little tips and pointers on their shooting, which was such a rewarding thing to see, to see these kids making shots, and at the end of the day, they're making really good shots, groupings are tight and they're hitting bullseyes, and it was fantastic, and they had a great day.
I remember when I was in 4-2 Commando, we had a day on the range, and a load of Royal Marines cadets had rocked up. And even though they were sort of in the age of 8 to 12, they ended up on the range. This is not, I don't think this is, anyway. So this kid gets up with a 9mm Browning.
Wow.
And the Marines kind of behind him, trying to prevent the kickback.
Yeah.
And he took the shot, and it kicked back so hard, or his lack of control did, that he hit the wall above the butts, You know, the brick wall above the sand.
Yeah.
And the round came back and hit one of the Marines, like clipped him in the head.
Oh my God.
He was okay, I should say. It literally just kind of pinged off his head. And I remember he put his hand up to the what do we call the guy that runs the range? The guy that's
Range warden or the
yeah, not the kind of range warden, but the Marine who would have been running the session.
Yeah, I get what you mean. To be
We used
honest,
to have a name for that. I can't remember now.
I
Anyway,
can't.
he put his hand out and he said, "Corporal, I've just been shot." But you can almost see it happening. I saw this.
Oh my God.
This kickback. Yeah.
No more 8-year-olds with 9mm.
Ted, how much did the army, the military, do for you before? Were you discharged because of this?
Yeah, I was. Yeah. So it probably took a year, I'd say, before I started to get help. I'd come home from theatre, and things progressively were getting worse then because I was able to get alcohol, and obviously a drinking culture in the military is pretty strong. So I'd drink a lot, I'd get angry, violent, fight, and these sorts of things were sort of, oh yeah, maybe I'll get out of it. It's just natural adjusting back to sort of coming home from conflict and things. And it just didn't. It progressively got worse, and so did my mental health. The depression and the sadness that I felt was unbelievable. I was all I wanted to do was get back to Afghanistan. I wanted to get back behind that weapon system and continue to pull the trigger, thinking that if I had that mentality, maybe that angry, aggressive thing that had kept me alive on tour would keep me alive here, and maybe I'll sort of be able to get over this, which is that sort of, I don't know, that sort of alpha male attitude, I suppose, that male bravado of stiff upper lip, you'll get through this, it was never going to work until the point where I reached breaking point, and breaking point involved me on the floor fighting with my own dad, who we've got a great relationship and always have done. So that was the turning point where I kind of went, right, I don't so much mind fighting with strangers in pubs or letting people fucking punch the life out of me because it feels good in a way, almost like a, I don't know, self-harm sort of thing. But once it happened in my own house or my parents' house, that was it then. That was time where the following morning I spoke up to my commander and sort of said, look, this is what's happening. I don't know what it is. And at this point, I'd never heard the term mental health, really. I certainly never heard of PTSD, that's for sure. And as I was having this conversation, the platoon sergeant was like, oh, hang on, I'll ring the med centre now. I think there's someone here. So that got my brain ticking a little bit. It turned out there was a psychiatric nursing camp. So I started thinking, why? Why is there a psychiatric nursing camp? Who's having psychiatric problems here? That kind of thing that just bedazzled me, to be honest. I was very confused at how did I not know that other people were struggling with this shit? And it was secret. It was a secret that I felt like I was contagious then. And I felt like it was this leprosy sort of thing that, you go anywhere near it and you're going to get it and it'll be the end of your career. And it turned out it was, unfortunately, but I don't think that's the case now. At least I'd hope not. But something I do plan on doing next year will be going around to camps and talking to serving soldiers about this kind of thing, about, looking after your own energy, protecting your mental state, and actually talking, because it does boil down to, if you talk, you're in with a chance of fixing this. If you don't talk, you've got no chance,
Yeah, can I just chip in and say something there?
Yeah.
The problem is, because all the charities and the war films like your Rambo, your Platoon, all of those films were set up for a specific reason. It was to take the focus off the war, because everyone was eventually against the Vietnam War. There was a massive peace movement, right? So the kind of the controllers thought, hang on, we've got a load more wars programmed in. How can we turn the people back, pro-war? So they did it
Yes.
very cleverly. They brought out these Rambo films and Platoon where the focus wasn't on the conflict, it was on the individual story. And
Okay.
you had to love this character. And, John Rambo, he's this tortured veteran. He's been behind enemy lines, and he comes back from Vietnam, and he just gets treated like a piece of shit by some king shit cop,
Yeah.
some egomaniac who doesn't know what he's been through. And off the back of
Yeah.
that, you got your, thank you for your service, sir, and all of this kind of stuff that we know is all really cringy.
Oh, it's so uncomfortable, isn't it?
Yeah, I know it's awful, but civilians have just all been indoctrinated into that now. It's the first thing people say when they meet me is, "Hi, Chris, I'm really sorry I was never in the Marine." I'm like, "Fucking, what are you talking about?" It was shit most of the time, and I could, I could have ended up getting kicked. But
Yeah,
sorry,
that's it.
I'm
Yeah.
digressing a bit. But what I'm getting to, Ted, is the charities then have jumped on this bandwagon with the help for heroes, the walking with the wounded, all of this stuff that's making out that trauma is only something a military person experiences on the battlefield.
Yes.
And what they've done by doing so is all the veterans out there and military personnel that are struggling are saying, well, look, I can't come forward because I wasn't even in Afghanistan. People are going to think I'm an idiot. I'm a sissy.
Yeah, this competition mentality.
Yeah, I'm not worth it. I know something's wrong with me, and I'm drinking too much, and I battered the wife last week. But like, I'm not like one of these heroes that deserves the charity.
Yeah, it's that was something I felt. I felt like I didn't deserve the help, especially. So I ended up spending 3 months in a psychiatric ward, on suicide, 15-minute interval suicide watch, and the care and attention that I received, it was incredible. It was amazing, and I will always be grateful to those NHS staff that did that for me. It wasn't a military thing. It was NHS, and I felt as if I didn't deserve it. I thought I brought this on myself. There's other people, and then I see this when I have conversations with people. It always starts with, "It's nothing like what you went through," and I'm like, "Whoa, trauma's trauma, mate. Like whatever is causing you to feel a certain way, that is just as important as anything or anyone else's problems." And I think that comes along with stigma as well. I feel like the stigma that's attached to a mental health problem as being weak, um, is a part of that, where people feel like they have to qualify this threshold of, oh, if I've done something like this or I've gone through this, I can't be weak. It's that's really bad. No, mate, like not at all. You know if you've been jumped in the street and had a kicking, the one person might go, "Oh, it's only a kicking," but the other person might go, "I thought they were going to stamp on my head until I died." That's traumatic, and so you can't weigh these things up. Yeah, it's a bit of a touchy subject for me, that one, because it's stopping people getting the help that they need, and it's also feeding into this stigma of people calling people weak and things, and anyone watching that is doing that sort of thing or has that mentality, fucking pack it in, because you're killing people, and it grinds my gears.
Yeah, the veterans community is the most, considering we lose the most blokes to trauma, they're the most ill-informed bunch of individuals. They're nasty to each other, a lot of them.
Yeah, I think there's the fine line between that black dark humor and sort of actually saying things that are fucking hurtful to people that are killing people. Like I've been in rooms with special forces guys in absolute tears over something that could be compared as, "Oh, that's not actually that bad," or that these sort of people would say, and it's like, fucking hell. you know, there's no score chart, there's no ranking system to trauma, and this, yeah, it seems like a lot of the veteran community, especially sort of old school guys, have got that. weak, or, stiff upper lip, ignore it, just man up, and get through attitude. When reality is, fucking hell, how many people do they know now that have killed themselves? I certainly know a lot, you know, and it needs to change. And I think until people can understand this context sort of thing, why things are happening, I think, yeah, something drastic needs to happen. There needs to be a big change.
Yeah, well, sadly, drastic shit is happening, but there's so many lads have killed themselves recently.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
it's why I keep talking when you mention, the person in your brain that's supposed to be storing the files and
yeah,
they end up getting left on the floor. With childhood trauma, what happens is there isn't that mechanism there in the first place. You're too young, your brain hasn't developed. So these horrific, at times horrific experiences you go through, you don't know, your brain cannot process them. So they say they get hidden in your body, in your physical self, which is
yeah,
why people can go through a whole military career, 22 years or whatever the case may be, and then come out the other side, and suddenly all of this trauma that they've had stored up their whole life comes to bear. And
yeah,
then things don't start making sense. They start self-medicating or whatever it is, and you get this downward spiral. And
yeah,
it's not helpful if people are just shouting PTSD, PTSD, because it's like, hang on, they've had PTSD their whole,
yeah, yeah.
their
That's
whole
it.
life.
Yeah, and physical things as well. Like for men in particular, our hips and lower back store trauma, which is something that I've been going through for years and years and years now. Lower back pain and a sort of chronic pain, which is a physical reaction to these things. Just how someone may clench their jaw and stuff. Our hips and lower back, they hold that trauma. And I think this sort of thing led into my like spirituality sort of angle. Now I'm not someone that I'm not a religious person. I'm not someone I'm not delusional and thinking that I can make magic happen. What what it did lead me to do though was find peace, and then find a peaceful place in my mind where I could do this work. Which is where things like alternative medications came in, like I talk about cannabis and psilocybin and dimethyltryptamine as well, DMT. These are all tools that I'd used, which is a very tightropey subject, especially in the military and veteran community, because it's drug use.
I think it's pretty much like openly talked about now. I think a lot of people recognise that
Yeah,
if you just stick with your A game, you're not going to learn shit, are you? You gotta
no,
you got to be
that's
willing.
it.
You
For
got to
me,
be
I,
able.
I I believe that the reason I was able to sort of conquer my PTSD was because I didn't just go to therapy. I went to therapy, and then I had a spiritualist mentor who was helping me, guide me with meditations and that sort of thing, like inner child meditations and forgiveness meditations. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of those, but they are, wow, extremely powerful things that certainly added added to my healing ability, let's say. But then using things like cannabis to be able to lower anxieties, or to be able to get myself into a calm enough state to actually do the work that I needed to do, to be able to think about these things without becoming overrun by these emotions that were just too much to handle. It allowed me to be able to sort of face them, as well as mood lift and be able to get a night's sleep. So the first time I actually tried cannabis, a friend of mine said, "Yeah, I'll smoke that," because nightmares were driving me insane. I couldn't sleep. I was lucky if I got 2 or 3 hours in a night. Um, so I did. I smoked cannabis for the first time, and I didn't have a nightmare. And then I was like, "What the fuck?" Try it again. Tried it the next day, and I didn't have a nightmare. So that was sort of the initial. Okay, there's something to this. I started to then realise that it's been getting used as a medicine for thousands of years, all over the place, and so with other things, such as DMT and ayahuasca, and we hear about all these things quite a lot nowadays. Thanks to things like the Joe Rogan podcast, for instance. He's always talking about these kinds of things, isn't he? So yeah, I think that being able to have these different angles and having an open mind enough to sort of go, well, I'm going to give that a go. I'm not just going to write it off because someone says, "Oh, that's drug use," or you're a druggie. I'm not a druggie. I'm not a stoner. I'm, I've just used these tools that are unconventional. It's not something that I'm promoting and saying everyone should do this. Saying, look at the evidence, which is what I ended up doing at the time. It was the only evidence I could find was American evidence. The treatment the veterans and people suffering with PTSD were getting over there with things like cannabis and these alternative uh, medicines, let's call it. And once I started to do that, I began to learn. And then once I began to learn through therapy what was actually happening in my brain, the sort of science behind it almost, I was able to then approach it with a strategy almost. And I implemented these various different things at certain times. I planned it all out. So when I get to this point, I'm then going to implement this type of meditation or, what have you.
Yeah, I'm glad you talked about the spiritual angle. It's pretty much all I sort of talk about these days on my
Oh, yeah.
on my show. Ted, I'd love to chat further, but we're running out of time for this one. So you're always welcome to come back on.
I'd love to, mate. Yeah, once the book's out and we can have a good chat about it.
Yeah, definitely. I've been flashing up your book cover as we go.
Oh, lovely. Thank you.
There we go, friends. There'll be a link. I'll put a link below this podcast, folks, in the description box, so you can.
Yes. I've just found out today, actually, that there's a special offer, an introductory offer on where the book's £17.50 for the next few weeks, rather than £25. So I'll get that link over to you so that people can do that. Yeah. All about saving money.
Awesome. Thank you for being so honest, so candid, Ted. Really appreciate it. Obviously, it's not the easiest thing to talk around. I'm glad that you're on the mend.
Yeah. God,
and
the world is a happy, bright place for me once more.
Yeah, good.
Yeah,
that's it.
It's great. Life is good.
Yes, well, as I say to everyone, the past doesn't exist. So, we're deluding ourselves if we let it define our future,
Absolutely. What a great way to put it.
Ted, just hold on the line so I can thank you properly. But friends at home, if I can just give one last shout out for my Challenge Everest, Summiting Everest in April to shine a light for struggling veterans. If you can chuck us £5 to support our struggling veterans, that would be absolutely wonderful. If you could please like and subscribe, that would be awesome. And you might want to consider supporting the podcast through YouTube, Patreon, Locals, or Buy Me a Coffee for as little as $1.99 a month. And there's a load of benefits that you can see there. That just leaves me to say, Ted, thank you ever so much again, brother. Go study. Let's chat soon. Stay on the line. Much love to everyone out there. See you for the next one.
Yes. Thank you.